Before Watergate and the Pentagon Papers, the press had never majorly shaken the political fields in the U.S. The Pentagon Papers proved that the press wouldn't just lay down and accept the government's actions, but the Watergate investigation broke barriers for being the first time the press took down a president. Journalism is now an option for young people as a career because of Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein. People growing up in the 1970s saw the investigation and were inspired to work hard and become journalists, leading to arguably the golden age of journalism. The investigation caused ripple effects throughout the U.S. from politics, the economy, and to people's trust in the government. The Watergate investigation began with the Watergate break-in on June 17, 1972. 5 men were caught breaking into the Democratic headquarters to attempt to bug it. These men had thousands of dollars on them and a phone number for Howard Hunt, who worked in the White House. Bob Woodward was assigned the case at the Washington Post, and Carl Bernstein volunteered to make a couple of phone calls to try and get some more information. Woodward asked for help with the case from a friend in the FBI who became his deep throat. This informant told Woodward to follow the money, so he and Bernstein did. They found out where the money came from that funded the burglary by talking to a Miami lawyer who had access to one of the burglars' financial history. They discovered the money came from a man called Kenneth H. Dahlberg. Woodward found Dahlberg with the help of a Washington Post librarian who found him a picture of Dahlberg with a Minnesota senator. Woodward called Dahlberg and asked him about the money, and Dahlberg said the money was given to the Committee to Re-elect the President, or CREEP as it is known as. The journalist then went to talk to CREEP employees to try and find out how the money went to the burglars. They had someone talk to them and tell them about a secret fund that was used to pay for political espionage. They figured out that John Mitchell was one of the 5 men to control the slush fund and wrote an article about it that was published on September 29, 1972. They called Mitchell before the article was released, and he was quoted saying, "All that crap you're putting in the paper, it's all been denied. Jesus. K.T. Graham's going to get caught in a big fat ringer if that's published. Good Christ, that's the most sickening thing I've ever heard." They found a man called Donald Segretti after that, who admitted to helping a large political sabotage scheme against the Democrats. They called their sabotage rat fucking. Woodward and Bernstein then published an article based on Segretti's admissions and other known information about a major dirty trick campaign to sabotage Democratic presidential candidate Edmund Muskie in 1972. The trial for the Watergate burglars began on January 8, 1973. The 5 burglars, Howard Hunt and Gordon G. Liddy, were tried. 4 of the burglars and Howard Hunt pled guilty, and Liddy and the final burglar, James McCord, were convicted of conspiracy, bugging DNC headquarters, and burglary. In the White House, the situation was starting to get more desperate. Special counsel to the president, John Dean, said to Nixon, "We have a cancer within, close to the presidency, that's growing." John Dean was later a key witness against the Nixon administration. In 1973, McCord admitted to being paid by CREEP for the break-in, and the cover-up started to unravel. At the end of April, a few key men in the cover-up resigned. On May 17, 1973, the Senate Select Committee on Presidential Campaign Activities into the Watergate incident was open. The hearings began the next day. On June 3, 1973, the Washington Post reported that John Dean told Watergate prosecutors that he had discussed the cover-up with Nixon at least 35 times. On July 13, 1973, Alexander Butterfield, the former presidential appointments secretary, met with Senate investigators where he told them about the existence of an extensive secret taping system in the White House, and on July 16th, he testified before the Senate committee in a live broadcast, revealing that since 1971, Nixon had recorded all conversations and telephone calls in his offices. Nixon then refused to turn records of his tapes to Congress despite various subpoenas. Finally, Nixon tries to stop the legal barrage by ordering the firing of Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox in the Saturday Night Massacre. The Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General both resigned instead of following this order, and the Solicitor General eventually followed the order and fired Cox. Even after this, Nixon continued to claim his innocence and even claimed famously, "I am not a crook."
But in all of my years of public life, I have never profited from public service. I've earned every cent. And in all of my years of public life, I have never obstructed justice. And I think, too, that I can say that in my years of public life, that I welcome this kind of examination, because people have got to know whether or not their president is a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
On March 1st, 1974, the Watergate Seven were convicted and Nixon was named as unindicted co-conspirator by a grand jury. Finally, on April 30th, 1974, Nixon released edited versions of his tapes and it sealed his fate. Impeachment processes began on May 9th, and he was impeached on 3 articles: obstruction of justice, misuse of power, and contempt of Congress. On August 5th, Nixon released the Smoking Gun tapes, which confirmed his role in Watergate, and he resigned 3 days later.
I have never been a quitter. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first. America needs a full-time president and a full-time Congress, particularly at this time with problems we face at home and abroad. Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.
The Watergate investigation affected all parts of life in the U.S. The government was completely changed by it, with a president's resignation and 48 government officials going to jail for Watergate. Due to public pressure, election laws were changed to ensure that nothing like this could happen again. People's trust in the government was forever changed. Before Watergate, 60% of people trusted the government, and the highest it has ever been since is 54%, but that was immediately after 9/11, where people were forced to turn to the government for help. The highest it's been in the last 2 administrations was 25%. Voter turnout also dropped from 62.5% in 1968 to 56.2% in 1972, before dropping even lower to 54.8% in 1976. Voter turnout didn't return to over 60% again until 2004, when it was 60.1%. Watergate also caused a recession. In the first quarter of 1973, the annualized growth rate was 10.2%, and by the first quarter of 1974, the growth rate was down to negative 3.3%. The S&P 500 fell about 50% from 1973 to Nixon's resignation in August 1974. Watergate also helped increase the inflation rate into the double digits. It was at 3.6% in 1972, and then it went up to 9.6% in 1973, before rising even higher in November 1974 to 12%. The current inflation rate is 1.2%. The inflation rate during Watergate was the highest inflation rate since 1913. Unemployment steadily grew throughout the scandal, raising a substantial amount from 5% in 1973 to 9% in 1975. Watergate was one of the most important journalistic events in all time, and it broke so many barriers in taking down a president and causing this many ripple effects.